both sides of the conversation, family. We welcome you to this virtual space crafted especially for you. My name is Jada Curry, and I'm both sides of the conversation's marketing director and graphics design specialist. I want to take some time to ground us all as a community into this space we are about to open up in, so let's go through our community standards. Both sides of the conversation is providing a safe and honest space for open conversation, so we ask that you all be respectful of that. We also ask that you be respectful of each panelist, host, and participant. We do encourage healthy debates and conversations. Don't personalize anything with anyone. This includes name-calling, bullying, trolling, or shaming. This will not be allowed or tolerated. Your perspective is yours. It is not a prescription. You do not have to agree, but show respect. These community standards apply to all of our live shows and any virtual spaces that we hold on social media, including YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. We want to make sure that we are caring for each other as a community. This is our priority in all of our endeavors as both sides of the conversation. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed today's show and continue to stay in touch with us via YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or all of them. All right, thank you for listening and see you soon.
Welcome everybody to both sides of the conversation. I'm John Henry, Executive Director. Today is Sunday, so community, you know what that means. We're going to have another Sunday conversation today. This is going to be a great conversation, bringing education and awareness to our community about sickle cell. We have some phenomenal guests to talk about this disease and how it's impacting the Black and Brown community. So we are looking forward to that. With that being said, the buzz is in the air. You all see me. We have our 49er gears on. It's a great playoff game, and the Niners is up right now as they're getting started. So that's just good news. And I know community are out there having a good time. But every Sunday, you guys know we are here in this virtual space for our Sunday conversation. This is our first Sunday conversation in the new year. So we are excited as we kick off 2022 with our Sunday conversation. And you all know we promised you all last year we will kick off this year talking more about Black health and Black wealth. And we're going to continue to talk about financial things to impact our community, as well as the things that impact us in our health-wise, from mental health to the different things that impact our community. We're not going to let the conversation just all center around COVID. As we know, COVID has been impacting us as well, but there are a number of disparities in health issues that are impacting our community, and we're looking forward here in 2022 to tackle those conversations, bring that education information to our community, and also connect community with the resources so that we can get the support and help we need as we move forward for a healthier 2022. So we are excited, and today our co-host Brittany is not here, as she is out in the community doing the things that she's been doing. So we're looking forward to having her back soon as well. With that being said, if you all want to join us today for this conversation, if you have any questions, please go to our YouTube channel. Like, subscribe, turn on alert notifications so you'll be notified anytime both sides of the conversation go live for any of our community events or any of the things that we are doing in the community, as well as our 3 live shows a week. So we're just excited to get started. With that being said, we're going to jump in to a couple of the world announcements, and we're going to get through and get this show started. The first announcement is Black women. Look, they are looking to make gains in 2022 in the political realm as the midterms elections kick off. Cherry Beasley is well aware of the challenges facing Black women who run for state offices. Beasley is one of the 3 Black women, all Democrats, who established themselves as early frontrunners in statewide primaries, including Stacey Abrams. Shout out to her for all of the organizing and the work that she's done. She is making another bid for Georgia governor. So I hope all of our folks in Atlanta get behind Stacey, get out to the voting polls, or we are already knowing the issues that we are dealing with voter suppression and some of the things that we are dealing with. So community, get out there, get involved, and let's make a change. Also, U.S. Representative Val Demings, who has challenged the seat for Marco Rubio in Florida, another important seat that's going to be up, as our Black women in the community are doing some phenomenal thing. And it's 5 Black women who are running for governors, just shy of the 2018 record of 6. Between 16 to 20 Black women are currently are considered potential Senate candidates, which would break the record of 13 Black women Senate seats set in 2020, according to the Center of American Women Politics at Rutgers. That is phenomenal news. Okay, community, we need more representation, more folks who look like us in these political realms, helping get these bills passed, getting some of the issues out to the community. So I'm always excited when I see our folks stepping up, doing what they're supposed to do. Some of the local news here: Pacifica, California was one of the cities that was hit yesterday by the tsunami advisory issued on all of the coast here in the West Coast, as the National Weather Service forecasted the tsunami waves 1 to 3 feet that was hitting the coast of the all over the West Coast due to the volcano that was erupting in Tonga. So just nice to see not too many people were injured, but the waves were high, and they're keeping that advisory up throughout the weekend. So just be careful out there as those waves, those riptides are moving. We want to make sure that folks that are out having a good time is safe out at the beaches. With that being said, community announcements, we want to continue to let folks know about the Amazon Smell. Every time you shop on Amazon, you could do your part to help out both sides of the conversation. If you choose this as one of your charitable organizations, it's no extra cost to you, but every time you purchase something on Amazon, both sides of the conversation will get a small contribution to help support our efforts in the work that we're doing for a community. So please, if you think that we're one of those organizations you would like to get behind, what a way to do it every time you shop on Amazon. Also, our Giving Tuesday pledge is still going through February 2020 for all of our donors, sponsors, and folks who would like to support as well. Our Giving Tuesday pledge is still out there. You can go to our Both Sides of the Conversation website and donate, support there as well. Sign up for our newsletter. Great information coming out through the pipelines of our website and our newsletter. So make sure if you want to get involved, know what's going on, please connect with us there. Also, for our Both Sides of the Conversation announcements, the East Oakland Collective, Both Sides of the Conversation, a number of community organizations are coming together for the Feed the Hood 20. This is a very important food drive and distribution that is happening February 12th, 9 to 12. Is going to be happening at the East Oakland Collective office at 7800 MacArthur Boulevard. We'll be out there helping impact our unhoused brothers and sisters and making sure folks in the community during these cold months have food and clothing and things of that nature. And we're looking for community folks to come out and support as well. There's volunteers needed. You could go to the East Oakland Collective website. You can go to our website and connect if you would like to volunteer or be a part of this important event, Feed the Hood 20. It's going to be happening. It's going to be fun. Also, Both Sides of the Conversation, East Oakland Collective, and a number of other organizations, SF Black Wall Street, Bayview Y, Mo Magic, Collective Impact. We're going to be out for our family bowling day that's going to be taking place on February 19th from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. at Sea Bowl in Pacifica, California. This is a free family event, so please come out. We're going to have some fun. We're going to be bowling with our young folks. We're going to bring community out and make sure that our folks in the community connect during this COVID time and make sure we can just be as community as one and enjoying the day with each other. Hope you all be joining us for that event. Also, the reopening of the Bayview Martin Luther King Park, the Casey Jones Playground, is going to be having the groundbreaking on January 22nd, 10 to 4 p.m. It's going to be at 3rd Street at Armstrong. There's going to be free swimming at the swimming pool, a baseball game, as well as the city fair is going to be out there for jobs. So I am looking forward to seeing it. I just drove by the park yesterday, and it looks amazing. I am happy that they are getting the space back open as we have our senior sitting across the street from there, and they utilize that park for different things like exercise and just being able to get out in community, the park benches. So we are happy that the park is back open. And shout out to Park and Rec for doing a phenomenal job of re-beautifying our community and making sure that our spaces are back open and utilized for community. So just excited for that event for that day. Also, this weekend, there are continued Martin Luther King events that are taking place. If you are still trying to find out where you're going to be at on Monday, or if you're looking for places to go to Please visit the Mlk Events. There'll be events happening all across the Bay Area. If you'd like to be a part of that, please check out there. We'll be out in the community as well. So check it out. We'll be posting where we're going to be at and celebrating Dr. Martin Luther King and his legacy and all of the things that he has done for us as people and as this country on this 93rd year would been his birthday. So excited about that. Also, save the date for the African American Heritage Nights for the Warriors and Kings at the Chase Center in San Francisco. Tickets are going for $65 to $70. If you would like to be a part of this night, or if you've been trying to get to the new Warrior Stadium and check it out, what a way to get out and support on this night, February the 3rd. We'll be out there tabling both sides of the conversation. It'll be a great opportunity for community folks to come out, check out the stadium, and represent our African-American heritage. Shout out to the Warriors and all the folks behind the scenes that are making this happen. We know the tickets are very, very expensive, and community has been struggling to get out there to the new stadium. But what a way to get out there on this Thursday night on February the 3rd. Come out, celebrate the Warriors. If you'd like to get tickets, you can reach out to us at both sides of the conversation. Go to our events at bsotc.org for more information, and we'll be getting that information out as well. Come out and support. Come hang out with the community and folks, and we will be out there as well. With that being said, for community announcements, that is it. I'm going to close my mouth. I want to give a huge shout out to my sister, Tanise. Happy birthday to her yesterday. Phenomenal birthday event. Want to give her acknowledgement to all of the SF Black Wall Street folks that are doing phenomenal things to impact our community. Want to give a huge shout out to Wealth Disparities, Mega Black, and all of the community folks that came out this past Friday to City Hall to talk about the state of Black San Francisco. A phenomenal event. About 175 folks showed up. I know we got more folks in the community. We got to get them out. But it was nice to see everybody out in the community talking about the issues that are impacting our folks here in San Francisco. And it's a lot of work that needs to be done. But again, while we have the ears of our elected officials and our leadership, let's continue to rally behind community, and let's make sure that we get the things that we need for our community, because we know we are in a crisis here in San Francisco and as well as around this country when it comes to housing, incarceration, substance abuse, mental health, and a number of things that impact us in this community. Food security is the top of the list with housing that we have to continue to address. We have to hold our political elected officials accountable to make sure those resources and services get back to our community. So we're going to continue to do our part here at both sides of the conversation. We're going to continue to fight for you all in the community and make sure that the work that we're doing with the Mega Black Watchdog Group and for all of the steering committees, making sure that these fundings and these resources really hit the community and impact our community as need be. With that being said, we're going to talk about sickle cell disease and awareness today. I'm just going to give out a little bit of community information before we bring up today's guest to talk a little bit about sickle cell and how it's impacting our community. For folks that don't know, sickle cell is a disease that is a genetic condition that affects the body red blood cells. It occurs when a child receives 2 sickle cell genes, one from each parent, and someone living with that disease. The red blood cells become hard and sticky, and they look like C-shaped form tubes called sickle. While the disease is most common among African American, other racial ethnic groups are also impacted by the disease. Latinos and people of Middle Eastern and Asian descent also are impacted by this disease. Also within this disease, there's a number of disparities and issues that continue to impact patients and folks who are living with the disease. The system racism continue to plague our country and the world as well. And sickle cell is not excused of it. There's a lot of healthcare issues and needs that we need to go ahead and confront for the day-to-day folks who are going for services and to make sure that they have that experience. But there has been a number of issues when it comes to those health disparities in our communities and our health systems. So we want to make sure that we continue to highlight sickle cell and make sure that our community is aware. And they're saying it's about 100,000 Americans who have sickle cell, which is about 1 in every 365 African Americans and 1 out of 16,000 Hispanics. This is a disease that's been around for a while. I know the Black Panther Party was big on highlighting it and bringing it to the fronts of our community. And as our community health systems continue to identify and research and figure out how to combat it, it's going to be something that we're going to have to deal with. So today, we're going to bring up some phenomenal panelists to talk about it and educate our community and bring some of the resources to the community. With that being said, first of all, I'm going to bring up each panelist and let them introduce themselves to the community and talk about their role and how they're impacting this disease, sickle cell. So with that being said, we're going to start off with Dr. Treadwell. We're going to bring her up so she can introduce herself to the community. Good afternoon, Doctor.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me. This is really an honor. It's a pleasure to be able to talk with you all about sickle cell disease. And as John mentioned, there is a real disparity related to sickle cell disease and sickle cell disease care. My role, I started off many years ago at Benioff Children's Hospital in Oakland as a clinical psychologist. I moved into writing grants and really looking at strategies to support people with sickle cell disease on an even broader level than working with individuals and their families. So I began writing grants, and currently I'm the lead on a few grants, one from the Health Resource and Service Administration that is for the Pacific Sickle Cell Regional Collaborative to improve access to care. Another one is with the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute that improves the quality of care. And then a third is called Networking California for Sickle Cell Disease. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that one. But I did have a very brief presentation that I wanted to share with you to just provide you with some education along the lines of what was said in terms of disparities related to sickle cell disease. So if John Henry, if you can bring up my slides, then I can start by...
Okay, one second. Let me just bring up the rest of the panelists and then we'll jump into it. That's all right.
Okay.
That's all right. All right. Next, we're going to bring up our own Camila Bailey. She is a sickle cell inspirer. She is out there advocating. She lives with it, and she is definitely advocating for it. So we want to bring on Camila Bailey to introduce herself to the community as well.
Hello, everybody. I'm Camila Bailey. I'm a sickle cell patient and advocate. I take sickle cell care for everyone very seriously. It's something I'm very passionate about because I live with it. I understand health disparities because I've experienced them. And I'm glad to be here to help talk about some of the issues that patients face and patient experiences.
All right. And then lastly, we're going to bring up Farhan Dozier, and he's going to come up and talk. He got some phenomenal stuff that he's going to talk about as well.
Hey, thank you. How's everybody?
All right.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead and introduce
yourself.
Okay,
thank you. Yeah, I'm Farhan. I'm a sickle cell trait advocate, retired Army. Spent 24 years in the military, and I'm here to share a little bit more about sickle cell trait and its risk factors. And so I'm just blessed to be a part of this conversation, and I have some presentations I'll share later on. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, good brother. Okay. So with that being said, we're going to bring up Dr. Treadwell's presentation and let her go ahead and lead us and getting us kicked off with today's conversation.
All right. So what you can see in this slide is an illustration of how sickle cell disease affects every part of the body potentially. So it was noted that the cells become hard and sticky, the red blood cells, and because blood flows everywhere, then you can have problems related to sickle cell everywhere in the body. So this can include the brain, the lungs, the bones, the immune system, the eyes, and this is a serious disease. And if anyone says that it isn't, they aren't telling the truth. But unfortunately, because sickle cell disease affects primarily African Americans, Black and brown people, it hasn't received the attention that it really deserves. Can you bring up the next slide? Thank you. So this is the nature of some of the disparities related to sickle cell disease. So first, what you have are what are called health resource disparities. And that means that there isn't access to materials, people, facilities, funds in order to promote health. And in the case of sickle cell disease, most of the patients in this country are actually Medicaid beneficiaries. So that may limit their access to doctors of their choice. Next, people with sickle cell disease have longer wait times to see a doctor and to get pain medication. So the hallmark of the disease is pain, and people have severe episodes that require emergency department utilization, and yet sometimes the providers keep them waiting longer and deny them needed care. Third, people with sickle cell disease, particularly adults, have challenges with seeing people who know about sickle cell disease. So the number of knowledgeable, willing providers is limited. Then this leads to what are called health outcome disparities. So the average life expectancy for people with the most severe form of sickle cell disease is a full 30 years shorter than for people who do not have the disease. They have the highest rate of returning to the hospital within 30 days of having been discharged. And they, again, have a number of complications, including stroke, that occur at a higher rate than for other individuals who do not have sickle cell disease. Next slide. So the real foundation in this country of the disparities in sickle cell disease, that is the health resource disparities, is what you can see here, disproportionate funding levels. So if you look at the far left, the blue represents people with sickle cell disease. The orange represents people with with cystic fibrosis. So there are 100,000 or more people with sickle cell disease in this country. There are just about 30,000 people with cystic fibrosis. But move to the middle and you see that the proportions start to go out of whack. You have much more funding in the orange for cystic fibrosis from the National Institutes of Health than you do for sickle cell disease in the blue. And then finally, you look at that last ring. That really shows you that there's a huge disparity in funding that comes from foundations and philanthropy for people with cystic fibrosis, even though there are many fewer who are affected, compared with people with sickle cell disease, so that the average funding per affected person is less than $1,000 for people with sickle cell disease and 10 times more for people with cystic fibrosis, a disease that affects primarily white people. Next slide. And John Henry did mention that the Black Panthers took this fight on in the 60s and 70s. So at that time, the median life expectancy was in the 20s. So people were not expected to live into the adulthood. And the Black Panther Party really took on the call to the Black community to support people with sickle cell disease. So what they did was to, among their pillars, education, social programming, food for seniors, breakfasts in the school. An important area was sickle cell disease. So they sponsored sickle cell trait testing throughout the community so that people would be well aware of their trait status to make informed reproductive decision makings. And Ferran Dozier will be getting into that later. And then they also really brought this fight to the legislature, to Congress, and really demanded, along with Black physicians, that the sickle cell care be improved and that funding be allocated for sickle cell disease. And in 1972, it was, and funding for research, education, clinical care, and the community was signed into law by President Nixon, the Sickle Cell Anemia Control Act. Next slide. And in Northern California, where I am, and we are, the Sickle Cell Center was established based on those funds. And the funding worked. As in the rest of the United States, mortality in childhood decreased quite dramatically. But for adults, sickle cell disease was still considered a community program and or community benefit program, and a program did exist for a while in a community hospital in the Bay Area, but they simply closed the program in 1999 so that adult care was displaced. And so we ended up taking on adults with sickle cell disease, even though we're a children's hospital, but that creates a lot of fragmentation of care because we can only see them as outpatients. They have to be hospitalized in the community. And then the funding that we relied on so heavily from the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute also was stopped in 2007. And public funding has always been inadequate. Access to care has been inadequate. And so the result is that mortality in the adult years has increased year by year. And the bias, discrimination, and stigmatization remain significant issues for people with sickle cell disease. Next slide. This shows you a surveillance program that was done in California and is still ongoing. And where are people with sickle cell disease living in California, and how many are pediatric and how many of them are adult. And the area that we serve at Benioff Children's Hospital in Oakland, which is about 4 or 5 counties, Alameda, Contra Costa, Solano, and San Francisco, there are about 1,000 patients in those 5 counties. And we only actually see a little over 400 patients in our sickle cell center. And so what that means is that there are many patients who are not being seen regularly by specialists who really know what they're doing in terms of taking care of sickle cell disease. And we'll talk later, and Camila particularly will really fill you in on a program that we're doing to, if you have sickle cell disease, or if you know someone who has sickle cell disease and you feel that they aren't getting the best care, reach out to us at Children's Hospital in Oakland, and we will be able to get them into care because that's critical. If you remember the very first slide, all of those organ systems can be affected. And if you don't treat lung problems early, kidney problems early, eye problems early, then there can be devastating effects. And so it's important to be seen in regular care. Next slide. And what we were able to do, if hearkening back to what I said about how the Black Panther Party worked together with the community, with physicians, to bring sickle cell disease to the forefront. And we were able to do that as well in California. We came together in that photograph, over 50 people from across the state of California. And you saw in the previous slide that there are about 9,000 people with sickle cell disease in the state of California. And many are not receiving adequate care. We all came together and wrote a sickle cell action plan for the state. And we put together a plan that it really included all of those aspects: community, research, clinical. And my colleagues in Southern California introduced that to the California State Assembly, and a bill was approved in 2019, as well as funding allocated by Governor Newsom to support people with sickle cell disease. And hence we have this new program called Networking California for Sickle Cell Care that is specifically focused on improving care for adults. Next slide. So at our Center of Excellence, again, we see about 400 pediatric and adult patients, but we spend a lot of time educating providers and community members. So again, if you're a person with sickle cell disease and you've been seen in the emergency room and you're frustrated by some of the care, have your providers reach out to us, and we can provide them with training, not only about sickle cell disease and its clinical management, but about training to mitigate implicit bias that is a part of, unfortunately, this healthcare system in the US. And you can see on the right our other activities, the grants that I've mentioned. We've written standard of care guidelines to improve care across the state. We actually work as well in Africa. I can very briefly talk with you about research that we're doing, a curative therapy, gene therapy, but I won't spend a lot of time on that. But again, if you're interested, reach out to us here at the Sickle Cell Center of Excellence at UCSF. But we're very focused on health equity and inclusion, given the disparities that sickle cell disease has faced. And we really want to partner closely with the community. So we hope that not only people with sickle cell disease who are stakeholders, not only community-based organizations focused on sickle cell disease can join us, but this is a great opportunity that we're taking on right here with both sides of the conversation to let people know this is a community issue. It's not just about individual patients with sickle cell disease. Next slide. So just to put it out there again, racism exists. It's a system. It saps the strength of everyone. And in the case of sickle cell disease, as well as other health disparities, we have to recognize and rectify historical injustices. Resources need to be allocated. People should not have to see providers who do not know about sickle cell disease. There need to be better resources throughout the state of California, throughout this country, according to needs where patients are. We are looking at these curative therapies, but we can't lose sight of the lack of access to quality of care for so many people with sickle cell disease. And dismantling structural racism requires a look at policies, but it also requires everyone to take personal responsibility for how racism is mediated on the interpersonal level. So I actually can stop sharing slides at this point, and I can, we can move on to Farhan, and then when we want to have a panel presentation, I'm here until 3.
All right, thank you. Definitely, I want to ask some questions, but let's get through Farhan's thing, and we can probably get a couple questions before you check out for today. But thank you for the presentation. Great information, and hear both sides of the conversation. We would definitely love to help do some of that outreach as we are in a community. We want to bring mobile pop-up and testing in our community so that we can combat this disease. But with that being said, Farhan, if you want to go ahead, you want to pull up this video first, or did you want to use the other slides?
Yeah, play the video first, and then I'll bring up the slides.
Okay.
Hey, what's up, man? How you doing?
I'm blessed, my brother. How you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Hey, did you see the game last night?
Oh, that was a good game.
But did you see the shot?
I lost money from that shot.
Oh, man, that shot was cold,
I
man.
hated it, but it was good. Damn. What's in those jeans?
You really want to know?
I do.
Exhaustion, muscle spasms, asthmatic issues, unexpected sickle cell trait crises.
Damn. Are you serious? When I was young, I found out I had sickle cell trait. My mom's told me, but I ain't have no knowledge of it. But when I got older, I had a child, and the doctor told me my daughter has sickle cell trait. Do you know the facts that both parents have sickle cell trait? There's a 50% chance the child may have the trait, and 25% chance the child may have the disease.
Hey, that's what's the count. Do you know that 2.5 million people in the United States have sickle cell trait, 300 million people globally? I didn't find out I had sickle cell trait until I was in the Army, 10 years. Next thing you know, I had a sickle cell trait exertion site.
Sickle cell? I thought that was a black gene or something.
Nah, man, the Latin community is number 2. 1 out of 36,000 babies are being born with sickle cell disease. You could be Caucasian, Mediterranean, European. You gotta know your bloodline, man.
There is an inherited gene in our community that has been forgotten. The name is sickle cell trait. WDCONSCT, also known as What's the Count, is out to bring awareness, education, and prevention to people all over the globe. Want more information? Call us now at 323-215-5384 or visit www.wdconsct.org.
All right, thank you. All right, so again, I'm Farhan Dozier, a retired Army Sergeant First Class, spent 24 years in the military, and I'm here to share with you some information about sickle cell trait. So I know we just have about 20 minutes before the doctor has to leave, so I'll go through this as quick as possible, and then we can touch on it some more later. This is my foundation called WDConsct.org. That is the QR code right there. You can go there and take a survey that my daughter, who has sickle cell trait, also created to let us know what you know about sickle cell trait. This presentation is what's so with sickle cell trait, also known as SCT, also known as HBAS. This is our foundation. After I retired from the military, I found that I had a conversation in this sickle cell trait inherited gene, not just by sharing my story, but also sharing some basic facts about sickle cell trait. This information can be found on the CDC website, created about 2012. These are just the basic facts that I'll be going over. We talk about what is a hemoglobin. It's found in the red blood cells, carries oxygen from the lungs and to the tissues and organs. And again, when affected by sickle cell disease, the red blood cells become sticky, rigid. That's me. I have one normal and one cell that is sickle cell trait. For those of you that might know, sickle cell trait does have a purpose. It combats malaria. So back 5,000 plus years ago, when people got malaria, they would die. So the body created this defective gene. And as you can see here, malaria is carried by parasites, attacks the red blood cells, and many people died. So with sickle cell trait, there's an opportunity for that person to survive malaria. As African Americans, we are number one. You probably heard that as well. But today, you can be Caucasian, Mediterranean, European, Asian descent. Is no longer a color. We could do a campaign about that for the next 15, 20 years, just disappearing that myth that it's only a black gene. But we are number one because of where malaria is present. Those are just some basic facts about sickle cell trait and how it was discovered only in 1910 in Western medicine. And as if you heard from the other presentation, if both parents have sickle cell trait, there's a 50% chance that child have sickle cell trait, 25% chance that child could have sickle cell disease or anemia, and also a 25% chance that child could be born with normal red blood cells. And that's me. I was the one parent that had sickle cell trait. Out of my 3 daughters, only one inherited. Sickle cell trait globally, they say that 300 million people plus have sickle cell trait. You can see in this presentation, Nigeria with 30 million, all the way down to Brazil, Tanzania, Ghana, and United States. They say between 2.5 to 3 to 4 million people have sickle cell trait, and millions still don't know. This shows you if you have normal red blood cells, AA, me in the middle, AS, and for my community that I advocate with, some have sickle cell, SS, or other types of sickle cell disease. Those red blood cells last about 20 days, when your normal red blood cells last about 100, 120 days. It's inherited. It's not contagious. So just like your complexion, hair texture, facial features, eye colors, your parents didn't get a chance to pick any of that. They don't get to pick those features. And just like sickle cell trait, it's inherited. And it doesn't skip generations. With each pregnancy, that child can be born with either sickle cell trait, sickle cell SS, or normal with each pregnancy. This is where it gets personal. I'll share this more later. The risk factors of sickle cell trait. Most people with sickle cell trait do not have any symptoms of sickle cell disease. Keyword is although. In rare cases, people with sickle cell trait might experience complications of sickle cell disease, such as pain crisis in their extreme form. And in rare cases, the following conditions could be harmful to people with sickle cell trait. Places like Denver, Colorado, Cheyenne, Wyoming, where the oxygen is thin. Some people have experienced complications there, scuba diving, low oxygen levels, again, and also when it gets personal to extreme exercising, like in the military boot camps and also athletic competitions. Sickle cell trait, the complications, they look like dehydration. Again, they can be experienced, some people with flying, high altitudes, mountain climbing. And there's definitely need to be more research done on sickle cell trait. And there are organizations doing research on why some people with sickle cell trait have complications and some of us don't. So I'm here to share with you the risk factors of sickle cell trait exertion. Again, some people with sickle cell trait have been shown to be more likely to experience these type of complications as heat stroke, muscle breakdown. I had that called rhabdomyolysis. I experienced that in the military after doing the 2-mile run exercise. It happens in military, happens in athletics, preseason football a lot. Athletes are overexerting themselves and not enough water, could be dehydrated. And it's not that you can't be in the military or have an athletic career. It's just that you might have to be able to set your own pace and build up to those intensities slowly. Again, some of the risk factors, just make sure you rest between repetitive sets and drills, drink plenty of water before, during, and after training conditions. Keep your body temperature cool, especially if it's hot outside. And again, if you feel heat stroke, dehydration, muscle fatigue, muscle weakness, make sure you seek immediate care. One thing we'll talk about is getting your partner tested. As sickle cell trait advocates, we are responsible for the conversation around other red blood cell conditions like hemoglobin C trait, thalassemia trait. So it's not just sickle cell trait. If your partner has another red blood cell condition that is inherited, like hemoglobin C trait, and you don't have that partner tested, you could have a child with sickle cell SC disease because that person can pass the C or the A. Same with thalassemia, same with OA-RAB, Monroe. There are thousands of different types of red blood cell conditions out there that when a child is born with sickle cell trait and another one creates a different type of sickle cell disease. So you have SS and you have people who live with the type of diseases as hemoglobin C and thalassemia. The test for that is the hemoglobin electrophoresis. There is newborn screening, and depending on what state you are from is when your state started the newborn screening. But if you could be, my age, I didn't know until I was 29, and I'll get into that later. So just make sure you check with your state on when they started the newborn screening to see if you were actually tested, or maybe your parents can remind you that you are a positive sickle cell trait carrier. But the test is the hemoglobin electrophoresis. They draw blood. I call it shocking the blood. And how those red blood cells mutate determines what type of red blood cell condition you have. What I want you to take away from this conversation from me today is know your trait status, whether you're sickle cell trait, thalassemia, hemoglobin C, D, E, and many more. With sickle cell trait, asthma and cardiac arrest could be triggered. So breathing, muscle tightness, and lack of oxygen could cause complications with sickle cell trait. Some people have died and they're trying to figure out if sickle cell trait is the trigger in those cardiac arrests. Acute illness, immune system, colds, flu, those all can lead to dehydration. Lack of sleep, fatigue. You may not have pain, but some people experience fatigue with their sickle cell trait. Again, dehydration and muscles are weak. We all know that diet is important. So make sure that you hit a proper diet, but also your water. You're supposed to drink half your body weight in ounces of water per day to avoid dehydration. Also with sickle cell trait and rhabdomyolysis, there are some medications that can cause the side effects and the health complications. So with rhabdo, there's different medications like statin drugs, cholesterol medication that can already cause a person to have high levels of creatinine kinase levels with sickle cell trait or just with rhabdo alone. So if you're on medication with sickle cell trait, you want to make sure that the side effects from those drugs doesn't cause health complications when you're exercising. And again, if you or you know someone who has sickle cell trait or is a student athlete, make sure that they are aware of their trait status when they do their physicals so they can get the knowledge and understanding of how to take care of their bodies and balance with hydration. I'll be around for more questions, and I really appreciate your time. And again, I'll be here to answer some questions later. Thanks.
Wow, great presentation, great information for the community. And I know Dr. Treadwell has to get out of here shortly, and just wanted to ask her a couple of questions before she leaves. Because of these disparities and some of the things that are impacting our community in the health standpoint, I have a partnership with Rafiki Coalition. We talked about this a little bit last year, trying to find out how do we advocate. We had our doulas and midwife shows, and one of the biggest questions and comments that we got from community was we don't have enough advocates in the community to help support folks who are going through any type of health issue, whether it's sickle cell or any other type. But since we're talking about sickle cell today, my thing is this call to action is how do we get the elected officials behind it? How do we get the community to also help advocate to get the policy change? But then how do we get our health system to really invest into our community and make sure that the resources and amount of services that are needed get to our community folks, dealing and combating this sickle cell disease?
That is a really excellent question, and I thank you for asking it. Just as with the Network in California for Sickle Cell Care, where Governor Newsom did sign, funds into his budget for sickle cell disease, I think that we have to partner between, us as a Sickle Cell Center of Excellence and the community, so that when you need to raise your voice and add advocacy. So one example is that there is a bill that's going to be coming through Congress, and actually there are going to be potentially 2 sickle cell bills. And Barbara Lee has been a strong advocate. Our congressperson has been a very strong advocate for sickle cell and sickle cell trait awareness as well. So I think that if we can form this partnership and make sure that we keep information coming to you when we know that she needs your support, for example, to get a sickle cell trait awareness bill through Congress, or a sickle cell disease treatment act through Congress, then that would be one thing that we could do. Secondly, the Network in California for Sickle Cell Care, the funding is slated to end June of 2022. So if we run into any troubles with the funding being reallocated, then we'll let you know again, so that you can raise your voices to the California legislature, to Governor Newsom, and let them know this is important. It needs to continue. Let's see. So I think those are the main things. And I think that the partnership is what's important, so that we need to continue to get information to you, to Rafiki Wellness, to other groups, so that at what junctures we need to really reach out to our representatives and make sure that sickle cell funding continues or is increased, which is what is needed.
Yes, definitely. And we got some talks with Roots in Oakland as well, talking about some work with them, because we have to bring these services to the community. I know Brother Farron put up the test kit, right? And that was one of the things that I wanted to ask, because I've had several of these health conversations on this platform. We had the breast cancer awareness, and for whatever reason, there used to be a lot of funding. They said funding where we could bring up mobile test sites. And if we have this disease moving around our community, there's folks who haven't been tested, and we're just having a struggle in America when it comes to test kits. Even with COVID, we can't get rapid test kits for our home. How do we shift that narrative and start to become more proactive? And I know UCSF is doing a lot of it. I'm part of the UCSF family. I'm there every day, and I understand that there's a lot of research and things that are going on to help impact the community. But there's also a call from community that says, hey, they say there's resources, but it's not getting to the patient, right? And I read in the article the other day, there's about $17 million of research going to Children's Hospital. Is it going to be just for the children, or is it going to be for community at large?
Again, that's a really excellent question. And Camila has been working with us on a project for the last 4 or 5 years now, right, Camila, where we are trying to make sure that the patients, again, who haven't been in care, begin to understand about the importance of getting into care. So I can clarify a few things. There's a lot wrapped up in what you just asked. So the 17 million is actually related to a very specific research program. And that research program is to cure sickle cell disease. So we know that is, it's meant for the cure. And that, so other funds need to come for treatment and for improving the quality of life. And so that's where, again, this Network in California, the project we're working on, Sickle Cell Disease Implementation Consortium, all of those funding streams remain really important. And
Wow.
sorry if I missed any
No,
part of your question.
that's very important information. I know with UCSF and a number of the healthcare providers, we're on the cutting edge of genetic cells and all of that, stem cells. So we hoping that in the future, I know there's some other research stuff that came out in articles about how this research is kind of combating some of the healthcare issues that we're finding. So hopefully stem cell in the future will be the answer to cure, some of these issues. But lastly, one of the main important things that you talked about that was really a highlighted concern for me when we talk about these other diseases that are, the fibrosis that you talked about in the white community, and how our philanthropists and how our funders go out and support those organizations to make sure that they have funding and the larger corporate community gets behind those issues. For the community that we're talking about, our Black and Brown community, how do we rally around our health officials and our folks to advocate these funders and these philanthropists to really also be a part of supporting the Black community in these efforts? We have this big push in this country right now going about equity and talking about how do we bring equity to our community. But how do we shift the mind of these funders and not just be allies saying we support Black Lives Matters and Black issues, but we know Black health is one of the largest disparity issues that impact our community outside of mental health and housing. But how do we really get them to really commit to advocating and making sure that equity and access that you talked about and resources get to our community?
Right. And this is the time. This is the time to really demand that elected officials, foundations, corporations put, like you said, if Black Lives Matters, then they need to be putting funding into this. And, the curative therapies that we're looking at now, it's been delayed in terms of that research because there wasn't enough funding put into sickle cell disease research. And so, if you work for Google, if you work for Apple, if you ask their board of directors, what are you doing? Where is your funding going? Because there's no question that this funding, that foundation funding is going to other diseases, and sickle cell disease needs support. Again, as soon as people will say, I thought that was cured already. No, the cure isn't even, we're just starting. Or I thought it was gone, or I thought it was a Black disease. So we all have to just educate everyone. Anyone can be affected. So people should be donating to help sickle cell disease, just as they did with cystic fibrosis, just as they do with cystic fibrosis and cancer and so on. And it doesn't take away anything from anyone else. It's just to say that this disease has really been so hampered in moving forward and improving people's quality of life because it just hasn't had enough funding across the time that it was identified in the US in 1910.
Wow, great information. Well, we're going to continue to do our part here as we are trying to do with our community to make sure that our community gets the intentional education and the information and awareness and the resources. That's why we had this segment today, to bring folks like you to come on and bring this information, wake up the conscious minds of our communities and let them know that we have other things that are impacting our community besides COVID. And this is some serious stuff that we all need to get involved with. And you all are just the champions of today. I know it's a football weekend, but you all coming here. This is the true game. This is the true information that needs to come out to our community. And we're looking forward to continue to partner with these health organizations to make sure that our community gets the testing, the support, and the resources. And we're going to continue to do our part here to support as well. I know you have to walk out of here soon, but if there's any parting words or any information that you would like to get out to community, please do before you step away. And then if you have any resources or any information or websites that folks should come through, or any place that we want to make sure we connect our folks, please put them in the chat before you leave, and we'll get it out there to the community. And then if you all have while you're doing your research, any requests or flyers or research information that you guys would like to get out, please send it to our events at BSOT .org, and we'll make sure that we blast it on our social media. That's one thing that we're trying to do as events are coming up and support and services, especially when you're talking about our elected officials, because we have to really do a great job, and we're going to do a number of that this year when it comes to our elected officials, really making sure that our community understands the fight in some of these bills that these political folks that we're voting for. And we want to make sure folks that are supporting sickle cell, we get the right votes in there for them and let them know what side of the fence they on that. So continue work. It's going to be a lot to combat, but we're here to support. And thank you again for showing up today and supporting today's conversation.
Certainly. And I will chat in some information, but I saw that someone asked about growth problems for people with sickle cell disease, and I did want to answer that. So because of the anemia that, as was mentioned, the red blood cells die quickly. And so people can be chronically anemic, and they may be smaller than as children than their peers. But what we've really found is that people catch up in size generally, and that also that the disease modifying therapies that are available has really helped. So when I started working in sickle cell about 20 or 25 years ago, I did notice when I went to sickle cell camp that the children, some of them were a little bit shorter than their peers, again, even though they caught up as young adults. But now at camps prior to COVID, everybody, people are big, strong kids, and it's because they're taking their, they're taking their disease modifying therapies like hydroxyurea, and there are some newer ones on the horizon that actually address the anemia specifically. So I want everyone to, if you know someone with sickle cell disease, encourage them that there is something they can do besides taking care of yourself, getting enough sleep, eating nutritiously, drinking plenty of water. Also work in partnership with your physician and ask about disease modifying therapies, ask about your eligibility for the curative therapies, and go from there. This is our time to really change the quality of life for people with sickle cell disease. So I'll chat some things into for people to reach out for more information. And again, I really appreciate it. I wish I could stay, but this has been just great.
Hey, we appreciate you. Thank you. I know it's a Sunday football weekend. This is typically our family day on Martin Luther King weekend. So we really appreciate you giving up the time coming in. Great information. We'll definitely be reaching out. And again, if there's anything that we could do to help support, if you have any new upcoming information from your research and you'd like to utilize this platform to connect with our community, please do at any time. And we're here to support you as well. So thank you very much. Well, with that being said, as Dr. Treadwell is going to put some information in chat and transition out of here, we are at halftime. The Niners are up 16-7 at 9. So what a great time to transition into the rest of our conversation. We're going to have Brother Farron and Camila kind of talk a little bit more in depth about what's going on. And Camila's going to give us definitely some insight of the things that she's dealt with as a patient, as well as an advocate, and just some of the work that is going on to impact the community. So we're excited to finish up this last hour with the both of you, and I'm looking forward to a great conversation. But with that being said, Camila, if you want to kick it off, you've been waiting patiently, quietly, and Ryan, you could jump in. We just go have a real conversation about this and tackle some of the questions that community have as we move forward throughout the rest of this segment.
Okay. I'm here to talk about the sickle cell patient experience. I had a major sickle cell crisis about 10 years ago, and it put a stop to everything. And I moved naively through the healthcare system. I was a total, a green bean, when you're just totally green to the knowledge that you need to receive care for sickle cell disease. I thought, I'm going to walk into this hospital, I'm going to tell them about my medical condition, and they're going to take care of me, because that's what people do at hospitals. They take care of people. So unfortunately, I had to learn from the gate. I was given a lot of medications by my hematologist. I didn't know how to navigate those medications, and I wasn't getting the support that I needed in the beginning to understand the effect of those medications or what my options were. I was really at the mercy of my hematologist and at the hospital's mercy. So it was really difficult for me to understand, okay, why am I not being treated with pain medication? Why am I waiting so long?
I'm doing my chores, Mommy, so I can be a good girl.
And she's a mother too, as you all can see.
I'm a mom of a 5-year-old.
Mommy, I'm doing my chores.
And that's real. See, that's family. That's what we do here.
That's
Y'all
right.
see the young
That's
ones
right.
coming in, you know.
Okay. So not being medicated, not walking into the ER, spending 8-9 hours out in the waiting room, and then hearing someone say, "Oh, we're going to give you 0.1 milligrams of a pain medication that I desperately needed." My response was to fight back. So I fought, I argued, I raised my voice. I probably said a few words that are not professional.
Polite.
Unpolite. Exactly. But when you're pain, we're talking about bone breaking, bone crushing pain. I felt like my bones were being crushed. Sometimes it felt like my limbs were on fire. Sometimes it felt like my like I had razors on the inside of my arms and legs, and that they were cutting me slowly. So when someone came in and offered minimal pain management, it really broke my heart. It broke my heart because I'm in a place where I'm supposed to be getting care. So I reached out. The first organization I ever reached out to was to WDC when I was living in Dallas, Texas. He was the first person that I spoke to and found out that there is this thing called advocacy. There is a such thing as advocating for yourself, that there is a way for me to get across what I need to get across. And there are remedies. If someone is not taking care of me in the way that I think that they should be taking care of me, or that if it goes against my rights as a patient while I'm in the hospital, that, hey, I have rights. These are all things that I had to learn. And so part of what I speak about and what I tell people, other patients living with sickle cell disease, is that you have a way to advocate for yourself. You have to learn yourself first. You have to know, what's my hemoglobin? What is it normally? When you have to notice when your body is not doing the things that it's supposed to do. Are you overly exerted? Are you overly tired? Are you drinking enough water? Are you taking your medications and your supplements, such as folic acid and even now L-glutamine and things like that we're learning about? You have to make that assessment for yourself, and then you have to be vocal when you know something's not right. And you have to speak up for yourself and ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. And don't always accept the first answer. So I'll stop there and let Farhan jump in, because there's some important things that he mentioned on his presentation that will give patients a good way to ask those questions.
Yeah, thank you. Camila, thank you. Her and I met years, but almost 10 years. I've been advocating for 10 years now. So probably at least 8 or 9 of those years, we have been working together and empowering each other and people in our community. And she knows the ins and outs of my organization, and I really appreciate her for her support. I'm here to really address the sickle cell trait aspect of this conversation. A lot of it already has been focused on sickle cell disease, but let's talk about that inherited gene that these parents are carrying, right? And so as I shared with you in that presentation, there's a 50% chance that child could be born with sickle cell trait. And, with the numbers being old from maybe the 70s and 80s, like those numbers of how many people have sickle cell trait globally, but they're in the, 300 million people plus. And so for the advocacy work that I get to bring attention to is having these people understand and get the knowledge and information about this inherited gene that they may not know that they carry, right? And they may have also experienced some type of pain or complications throughout their life, and they chalk it off as, well, I'm an athlete, so I have muscle pains, or I have these kind of complications, or I was dehydrated, and so that's the reason. But we have to sometimes check what's causing the dehydration, what's causing the pain episodes. And so I'd like to bring up one more presentation, if I can, that will talk about in more detail of what my experience was as I share with you. Let me find that.
Definitely go ahead and pull that up. While you pulling that up, Farhan, I wanted to ask.
Yes.
Now I'm drawing a blank. I'm having a moment here. I can't
It's
think.
okay.
I just need to ask you something. But go ahead and pull up. It'll come back to me.
So when we talk about sickle cell trait and the complications, you know, again, I didn't find out I had sickle cell trait until I was 29 years old in the military. I had already been serving for 10 years at the time that I found out. And I remember having pain and complications as a child, but my mom took me to the doctor and said the doctor said it was growing pains, you know, things like that, dehydration. And so what I'm going to share with you, they say it's rare, and we want to figure out what do they consider in the medical care as rare, right? So this is my experience in 2006. I'll give you this to you real quick. So I was at Camp Roberts, California. It was Thursday, September 24th, 2006. At the time, I was 36 years old. I'm about to be 52 in 2 months. It was like 6:30 in the morning. It was about 50-something degrees as a temperature. I was at a military school, the Master Sergeant Academy called ANOC. It was my 17th year. I had done this exercise test 2 times a year, so it's not my first time. And again, it's been my 17th year, so you can do the math on how many times I've taken this test in 17 years. The exercise test consists of the push-ups, sit-ups, and the 2-mile run. At the time, I had 17:21 at age 36 to pass that test. So just to pass it, I needed 17 minutes and 21 seconds. I was wearing my Army physical fitness gear, the jacket and the sweatpants. I had just completed the push-ups and the sit-ups. And we're trained to sprint that last lap. So I'm out doing the 2-mile run. I'm running around the track, of course. And that last lap, I could hear my instructor, 15:45, 15:46. And so I'm thinking to myself, oh, I'm doing pretty good. Like I said, I got 17:21 and I hear 15s, almost 16s. So my brain kicks in to sprint that last lap as we're trained. I can tell you, looking back, that I did feel this electrical sensation come over my body, like this buzzing sensation, but I didn't think anything of it. So I continued along, crossed the finish line with 16 minutes, put my hands over my head to get air in my lungs, all the stuff that we're trained to do. But then all of a sudden, my peripheral started getting dark. And I'm like, man, I don't feel well. And so I kneeled down and I started, feeling nauseated, and I couldn't move. My muscles were weak. And then I said my vision got dark. So I closed my eyes, because when I opened my eyes, everything was spinning like 1,000,000 miles an hour. And so I laid on the ground, and the medics came and got me, and they rushed me to the hospital in Twin Cities at the medical center. When I got there in the ER, the doctor comes in and gives me an IV. He comes back and says, "You ever had kidney problems?" I said, "No." He says, "Well, you do now." And he walks out. He comes back in, he says, "You know what? Freak accident. You're probably dehydrated, heat stroke. I'm going to give you another IV. Take the rest of the day off and you should be fine." I'm like, okay, cool. I go back to the barracks. I wake up somewhere around 2:30, I say, and my symptoms are worse. Everything is still spinning. I'm vomiting. I have diarrhea, and that severe muscle fatigue weakness is still there. My classmates come back in the barracks about 16:30, which is 4:30, because class is over, and they see me on my bunk, and they rush me back to the hospital that night. The night doctor does some blood work, and he noticed that my kidneys were now at 50% each. My creatinine kinase levels, the CK levels, were over 12,000 and rising. For my age at the time, I was 36, so they're supposed to be around 150, but they were at 12,000 when I went back to the hospital that night. So the doctor in the ER diagnosed me with a condition called rhabdomyolysis, which is a skeletal muscular disorder Anyone can experience rhabdo if you overexert yourself. A lot of CrossFit, again, a lot of athletes, military experience it. What happens is the myoglobin in the muscles start to break down. They leak into the bloodstreams. Once it hits the bloodstream, it hits the kidneys, and because there's toxins and the myoglobin and the proteins, the kidneys can't filter it, so the kidneys start to fail. So what the doctor saw in the morning was the initial part of my renal failure. So what the doctor did was he put me on IVs for 4 days, and they sent me home. It took about 3.5 days before I could physically get out of the bed and walk on my own to go to the bathroom to urinate. I had severe muscle fatigue. I also still had some spinning, some vertigo issues. And so they sent me back home. My regular doctor started to monitor my blood work, allow me to exercise at my own pace. But what I noticed was when I got on the treadmill, it felt like I just got off a roller coaster ride in Magic Mountain. Like I was still just kind of out of it and kind of dizzy and sick. And so in 2009, we discovered that I just can't run anymore. I'm like, okay, I get on the treadmill, I feel sick, nauseated, you just can't run. So there's other events that we can do in the military, like the bicycle or the walk. I swim like a Chevy truck, like a rock, so I don't swim. So I just knew I could do either one of those events and I should be fine with my career. But I was still having this muscle fatigue and this joint pain. And so in 2010, I was on the military base because now I'm dealing with my mental health. And Captain Adams at the time drove past and he's like, how you been? I'm like, you don't want to know. He's like, tell me. I says, man, I could barely walk. My muscles hurt. I'm in these mental health appointments because I'm feeling like I'm depressed and anxiety or whatever. Something's going on with my mind. Like I can't think. And he says, you know what? Something like that happened to me where my muscles locked up. But I have sickle cell trait. So I have to drink extra water, take these vitamins. And I'm standing there like, why does that sound familiar? Sickle cell trait. And then I remembered in 1999, I had did my second physical in the military. I was transferring to another state and I had to do a blood work. And so the Air Force base that I was connected to found my sickle cell trait. And the doctor called me in a panic, like, you need to come back to the clinic. And I'm like, oh, shoot, like, did you find something? So I go back to the clinic and he says, do you know you have sickle cell trait? I'm like, no. He said, okay, we just want to let you know. But he gave me no brochure, no flyer, no information. All he says to me is just make sure you don't mate with another person with the trait because you can have a child with sickle cell disease. Well, at the time I had my 3 daughters and I wasn't having any more children. So I'm like, okay, but hold on. I have a cousin with sickle cell disease. Is it sickle cell disease? He's like, no, it's not the disease. It's just a trait. Just don't mate with another person. And that was it. So I packed up my house. We moved out of state, but I was still having these health issues. I was still having these problems. And so in 2010, I was able to get retested with my rheumatologist. And she also discovered a positive sickle cell trait test. And when we did our research, that's when we found that sickle cell trait with exertional sickling with rhabdo had been a condition in the military for years. And even in athletes, that people who have the trait exert themselves, causing that red blood cell, that's the trait, to mutate. And because that red blood cell mutates, there's no longer oxygen going to the parts of the muscles, which causes the muscles to break down and leak negative potassium and myoglobin. And so in 2013, the military found me not fit for service. They medical retired me. I was in a very bad state in my transition, depressed, ready to take my life. Life was over. And I found this community of sickle cell and sickle cell trait that I was connected to. And so when I discovered this community and that I had a voice in this work, it gave me the strength to continue to live. And so I went from, being a soldier and, defending this country to now being an advocate and to defending this inherited gene that, as you've heard, has been dealt with in different parts of the government systems that are lacking. And so today, like now I'm 51, about to be 52. I still experience symptoms of my sickle cell trait exertion. I still have muscle fatigue. I still have joint pains. I'm still dealing with my mental health. I can tell you in 1975, when my mom said that I would wake up out of my sleep crying, and my left arm would ache. And I wish I was a black Ken doll where I could just take it off and put it on the shelf. But she took me to the hospital and the doctor says, oh, he's 5 years old. It's growing pains. He's just growing. It's 5. He's 5. Well, I'm 51 and I still have that pain today. And when I did the research, and I shared with you in the other PowerPoint presentation, that people with sickle cell trait, it will never turn into sickle cell disease, but people with sickle cell trait might have complications of pain crisis and issues with their trait. Again, I joined the military at 19 and found out I had my trait at 10 years later. Again, I will be here to answer some more questions for you and to help Camila, my teammate, get some of this information out so people are aware. And for me, the biggest part of that conversation is bringing the awareness, right? Like having people have the courage and the confidence to go to the doctor and have that test done to find out what's going on with their bodies, and not wait until after the fact, like after the child is born, right? Or even now, with the newborn screening, to me, it's grateful to have that. But if those parents don't know ahead of time and you now have a child and you go to find out the status of your baby, and then they say, oh, well, guess what? Your child is going to be born with sickle cell disease. Do you want to abort the child, or do you want to have a child that's going to be born with the disease that has no cure? Like, that's already enough strain on the family who are having a child that comes with that joy and pain. But then now you have to make more decisions on what's the status of my child, and do I want to have a child with the disease, or do I want to abort this child? Which makes that conversation, it changes the dynamics. So for me, if we can bring this awareness to the couples before they decide to have a family and give them that knowledge and research and information so they make an informed choice. Not saying that you don't have a child. That's not my call to tell you. But at least that if you do know that your partner has the trait or whatever inherited gene, that you can make an informed choice and to have that child. And if that child is born with one of those diseases, then you already have the strength, you have the information, you have a community that you can come to get that support. But a lot of families didn't find out until after the fact. And that's what I want to make sure that we give them an informed choice. And just mobilizing the community. The sickle cell trait, sickle cell, we're no different. We have to unify with ourselves just as much as this conversation is separate, but together. Thank you.
Man, very powerful stuff. First of all, before we go any farther, I want to say thank you for your service, good brother. Because here at both sides of the conversation, we always acknowledge our military vets and our folks. And every Veteran Day, we celebrate our veterans for the great service that you all do for our community, especially our Black soldiers, because we know over the years the stuff that you all have been through, coming back to this country and still not being acknowledged and supported. We just want to let you know here from both sides of the conversation, man. Thank you for your service, and we appreciate you. With that being said, before we pass it back to Camila, I got my thought back together, my mind here. What I wanted to ask you, while you were going through your presentation, I wanted to ask Dr. Treadwell this, because I talked about this last year with Dr. Mo and some of our other, Dr. Noah from Roots. There's a continued conversation that need to be had about how do we put together some kind of smart sheet for our Black folks as we go into our healthcare providers. When we turn 40 years old, 50 years old, there's things that they say, hey, go get a colon test, go get this for men, or women have to go get certain tests, right? But how do we put together some kind of sheet for our community folks, Black folks, brown folks in the community, of things that they need to check, right? And maybe folks out there might have felt those symptoms that you talked about, but really don't know how to ask. And we have doctors who are guessing. But how do we get some of this stuff into a sheet where we say, hey, while you're doing this lab work, you're high risk of this given the area. She had the populations of where this stuff is heavy at here in the Bay Area as well. But how do we put together some kind of sheet for our community to say, hey, when you go do your lab test, some of the symptoms that you could be faced, have these checked, and so that we can get more of this testing done? Because a lot of times when we're doing these tests, especially at some of these institutions, they don't really go through these in-depth tests for our community. And we want to put together something. I've been asking this, I don't know, but how do we get our medical folks to say, hey, if you Black, let's check for these things when you're going, make sure you in tune with these things, so that we really could have some kind of self-advocation and folks just know things that impact our community, what to be looking for while we interacting in our healthcare system.
I'll take that on. I don't know the right answer to that because people get their burgers from different places. People go to Carl, they go right. So I think at the base of it is the awareness. Like there has to be a global conversation. There has to be a national conversation where it's not just, well, we don't need to talk about that because that's a black gene. Again, we need to disappear some of these myths and stigmas that when Ebola popped up, everybody across the world knew about Ebola and what those symptoms are. When the Zika virus hit, everybody knew about Zika virus. But these are some of the conversations that they have to have that level of awareness so that people could then look in their own life and be like, hey, you know what? They say that Hispanics can have this inherited gene. We need to make sure we check that when we go to the doctor. Like, it's again, because it's not just black people. So peeling off the myth that sickle cell trait is a black gene, like I said, I could do that campaign for the next 20 years and pray that I move the needle so that other nationalities look and see like, oh, you know what? Well, I'm white. I have blue eyes and blonde hair, but my dad was mixed with black. So then maybe I need to take a test and see because I feel some of these symptoms, not because I'm white and that's not what it is. So it's really challenging to answer like how we put that list together. I think the list is the end result, but what's going to generate the conversation to have those lists created in the different foundations like mine and where Camila's working with you and all the sickle cell foundations, everybody has their point and perspective that they focus on. But at the core of this conversation, if both parents have the trait, that percentage of child can be born. So the sickle cell trait conversation needs to be at the forefront just as much as the full dialogue as we focus on the after effects of the child being born. So it's a tough question to answer, but the awareness campaign has to be a global where when someone hears sickle cell trait, oh yeah, not like sickle cell trait. Oh, that's a black gene. We don't need to talk about that here. Like those are the kind of conversations that have to be had.
Wow, definitely. I mean, that's great information. I mean, we're going to continue to do our part here to continue to further these conversations, bring the outreach and the marketing to the community. And I was also thinking about that the other day is maybe, one of the things that we could do, especially since, Camila came on board and just talking to support you. We want to keep this information coming to the community, but just doing DNA testing and find out what's in our genes, because a lot of these diseases that we deal with in our community, with the technology and the resources that we have now, we can find out a lot of that. And we're putting together some things that we're trying to do for health and wellness. And I think that's something that we should invest in, letting the community know it's okay to get your DNA checked so that you can have something to understand what could be possibly impacting you in the future. But definitely, this is a conversation that we're going to continue to have. We're going to continue to push forward. We're going to continue to support this in our community. And we want to come up with some kind of sickle cell testing day, as well as we're trying to do a number of things with some of these health issues that impact our community. So, man, thank you for just bringing that to the highlight. The awareness is very important for whatever reason in our community. The education and awareness and the opportunity to get information to our community is just not happening. And that's why we're trying to play our part to make sure we get this out to our folks in our community so we know how to combat some of these issues that impact us within our health. Yeah. But Camila, go ahead. I've spoken up. Go ahead.
I just wanted to add on to that too. That's the wonderful thing about having these conversations like we are having today on the Sunday conversation. If people know that they need to ask, during a family planning appointment, I need to know if I have the sickle cell trait. That's a question that you can ask. I need to see how do I get my partner tested? That's a question that you can bring to the table. And conversations like these open the door to let people know, hey, I need to ask my doctor. I need to ask my doctor to include this test on my list of other blood tests that I already have to take. Just being able to advocate for yourself and know that even if you have a family history of any type of diseases, that you need to ask your doctor to go ahead on and test you for that. And that includes sickle cell trait. And for me, when I was coming up, I had a really hard time with sickle cell disease when I was a kid. From 1 year old until about the age of 8, I was constantly in and out of the hospital in San Francisco, just back and forth, back and forth. I missed a lot of school. I made most of my friends in the playroom at the hospitals. And, and then at age 8, I don't know what happened, but sickle cell just kind of decided to take a back seat until I was in my 20s. And in between that time, I knew it was there, but because it wasn't, I don't want to say active, but because it wasn't causing me a lot of issues, I did not ask questions. So I was very ignorant about what I needed to do. I did not know that I should be hydrating. I should be drinking a lot of water. I didn't know that I needed to check my hemoglobin levels when I became a teenager and got active, doing different activities and joining certain groups and being a part of certain community events. I was out there overexerting myself, and I had no idea. And I was really stubborn in my 20s as well, because in my 20s, doctors started to tell me what I couldn't do. So you know how that works, right? You tell somebody what they can't do, and they're going to do it anyway because you told them that they can't do it. So my doctors told me I couldn't have children. They told me I couldn't go to college out of state, that I shouldn't even try to have a career. All of these things, I shouldn't fly on an airplane. And I think I was more determined to do those things. And that kind of led me to kind of defy the doctor's orders. And I'm glad that I did, because I did all of those things. You've heard from my child in the background. And I went to school out of state at Grambling State University in Louisiana. I have accomplished these things that the doctor said that they couldn't do. But now that I'm older and I'm wiser, I know that I have to do these things with modification. So getting on that airplane, I'm going to stop at the little drugstore inside the airport before I get on the plane, and I'm going to buy an extra large bottle of water, because there's not enough water on the plane for that they give you in those little teeny weeny cups. For me, I know that I need extra hydration to sustain myself during the flight. I bring my medications where I have to go. I just put them in a pill container and put them in my purse. So I minimize the effect that sickle cell can have on my life, but I don't let it stop me. And that's important for sickle cell patients to understand, that the doctors are going to give you a list of things that you cannot do. But with modification and with education and being aware of your own body, you can accomplish all the goals that you want to. And part of advocacy is letting the patients empower themselves. You need to know that there are things that you can do. You need to know that you have rights when you step into that hospital. Whatever hospital you go to, if you go onto their website, they will list actually your patient rights. You've got to look for that. You've got to be aware of your rights, and you've got to execute your rights. So that's some of the things that we talk about. But I want to encourage everyone out there that's living with sickle cell, if you're not affiliated with a hospital or a hematologist or a program, to please reach out through both sides of the conversation so that we can connect you with people. You have a lot of life to live. There's a lot of good things ahead, and want to make sure that you get connected so that you can get the support that you need and learn how to advocate for yourself. So that's one of the main points that I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, and before I don't want to harp on it more, but what Dr. Treadwell and Farah was talking about, when we talk about the disparity and issues that we face, as a patient, Camila, for maybe a new mom or a new family who are experiencing dealing with sickle cell, what are some of the red flags or things they need to watch out for, or some of the experiences that you have dealt with in a hospital setting, or trying to get services, or just, trying to bring some of that awareness to a family or somebody who is new dealing with sickle cell or trying to cope with the child with sickle cell? What are some of the things that they should be looking out for? Some of the just issues that you had to deal with as a patient getting through care?
Well, I'll tell you about one particular experience that I had in a hospital. I won't name the hospital, but I was in that hospital, I believe it was 2017, and I was having an issue related to sinuses. So anytime you have sickle cell disease and you have another condition on top of that, it can exacerbate your sickle cell symptoms. So for me, I was going into crisis after crisis after crisis because of the sinus issue that needed to be taken care of. But every time I presented in the emergency room, they referred to me as a frequent flyer, which means that I was showing up in the ER often, requesting pain management, and that's often viewed negatively. So I waited hours in a chair. I was in tears, and my body had started to, it was harder and harder for me to move. So they put me in a wheelchair, and then they sat me right in that same spot in the hallway. They tried to access my port and were unsuccessful. And so they would not make a second attempt until I was actually in a room. And that took a few more hours. So we're talking about now probably about 7 or 8 hours just sitting in the hallway. And the pain is at this point mind numbing. I couldn't do very much. I could only cry. And I was really upset. And when they wheeled me into that room, I felt okay. I'm getting closer to getting some relief. And when I got into the bed, the nurse came in, and she tried to access my port and was unsuccessful. So I asked for a nurse who was familiar with accessing a port. I knew exactly what kind of port I had. I have a mini power port. I knew that you need to swab it 3 times with alcohol. I know that you need to use a chlorhexidine swab after the alcohol has dried, and then you need to wait for the chlorhexidine to dry before you put the needle in. And we both have to wear a face mask during this process. So I am aware of how you care for my port. So the nurse was angry with me or put off by me because I am a melanated woman who was advocating for herself, and she felt like she had the education and she's a nurse, and how dare I say that she wasn't doing the right thing. And so she told me, I'm educated and I have my bachelor's degree. And I'm laying there in pain, waiting for someone to access my port. And she's telling me about her education. So I was shocked. I was disgusted. And what I said to her was, well, I have a master's degree. So now that we've got our educations out of the way, can you find somebody to please access my port? Because I'm not going to let you try again because you're not doing it correctly. So now that we got that out the way, and I won't even sit up here and pretend that I said it nicely as I'm saying it to you guys. But, I said it. And I reported her, and I reported the nurse. Somebody came and they accessed my port. They gave me my medication. And then the nurse came back. I think she wasn't finished with me yet. She wanted to attempt to insult me more. So she stood out beyond the curtain where she was in public view, and I was behind the curtain. And she had stretched my IV tubing, and she had put something in my IV. And it was a pain medication that I was not taking at that time. And she yelled across the emergency. I asked her about the medicine. I said, what did you put in my IV? And she said, well, I put Dilaudid in your IV. And I said, well, I didn't ask for that. And that's not a part of my treatment. and you're supposed to tell me what you put in my IV before you put it in there. And she said, well, you requested it. And she said this loud enough. The point was to shame me for needing the medication. She wanted to shame me. And when I told her that someone else had been by a few moments before her, and they had already given me the proper medications that my doctors use, she kind of didn't know what to do. In her frustration with me, guiding her and trying to tell her how to treat me as a patient, she endangered my life by giving me a dose of medication that I did not need at that particular moment. She doubled the pain dose that I had received, and that was dangerous because, and if I hadn't asked, she wouldn't have told me. So with that experience, I reported her. I did it in writing though. Beyond our words that we had in the emergency room, I didn't cuss her out or anything like that, but I did audio record her on my phone. So the whole conversation about her degrees and the whole conversation about, me requesting medication that I did not request, all the shaming, and the fact that she endangered me by, double medicating me, that was all on tape. So I played that for hospital administrators. I played that for my patient advocate. I played that so that they could understand what I had been through. I was given apology after apology. But when I returned to the emergency room, that nurse was still working there. And she was still serving patients. She wasn't serving me because I refused her service, which is one of my rights as a patient. I don't have to have that nurse anymore because I can say I refuse to have this person treat me. I would like another nurse assigned to my care. But that experience, it left me feeling unsafe when I presented at that emergency room because I knew she was there. And I knew as a nurse that she had influence over the other nurses. I knew that the other nurses were angry because I had reported her, because I had told her that she was handling me incorrectly. I knew that I didn't feel safe there. And it didn't change for quite a while. But as a sickle cell patient, they tell you to get somewhere and get comfortable with where you receive your care. Because if you don't, you can be accused of hospital shopping, which is jumping around from hospital to hospital. And they can label you incorrectly almost most times. Most times patients are looking for better care. They're looking for supportive care with empathy and understanding when they switch hospitals. But unfortunately, we're labeled as drug seeking and going from hospital to hospital to seek pain medication. And that's just not true.
Can I share something? John, you asked the question about
meeting
parents. You talk about, what do we tell our parents, that's maybe going to be dealing with the child that's going to be born with sickle cell, right? And that conversation from my perspective is you got to be very careful, right, with how we share our experiences with the new parents that are coming in, right? Because we can pass down conversations that are not the truth, that could be corrupting to that family. And so there's a difference between sharing with that family what to do as an activity to do with that child, but also sometimes what gets passed is our experience of what you have to be aware of, right? So when you talk about the experience, you're talking about sometimes we pass on, well, when you go to that hospital, they're not going to take care of you. They're not going to do this. They're not going to. So when you show up with your baby, you're going to show up with the I'm nots, right? So you're going to be defensive right off the top. Okay, I give you my child to take care of him. What do you do? And so my view of that is we want to definitely teach the parents what to look for and how to take care of that child. but we want to make sure we don't pass down our experiences in the negative aspects. So when that family shows up to the hospital, that they're already on the defense at that hospital, and they don't allow that experience to evolve as it's coming, right? And so that's very important that I've learned, and to relate to, for people to listen to this conversation, don't listen to it like, oh, that's a sickle cell issue. That's not. This is a human being experience, right? Because I had been with this community for 10 years, and I kept hearing, they treat us like drug seekers. They treat us like drug seekers. And in my mind, I'm like, well, are you a drug seeker? No. Well, then why do you take that on, right? Why do you take that experience? If I try to sell you a size 12 and you wear a 10, you ain't gonna buy the 12, right? But one day, I was in a sickle cell conference, and my friend Dorian, we were having, and I posed the question, what is the drug seeker conversation? Like, what? Only less than 2% of the population are drug seekers in sickle cell. So why is 1% of the conversation in front of all of the things that are going on around sickle cell? And I was asking my questions, and I heard Dorian scream out, I don't want to die in the hospital. And I said, oh my gosh, I finally heard his experience. Because in my experience as a veteran, as a 24-year retired veteran, I have to beg my doctors to take care of me. I have to call the VA and beg them to let me come to the office to see what's going on with me. My community is going to the hospital to get taken care of, and they're not being taken care of at the hospital. So when I heard him say the relatedness that I experienced from my life on what they're dealing with that drug-seeking conversation, is you're expecting to go to a hospital that may or may not, but you may bring your information of what medication you're supposed to take. Like you have the knowledge of how your care is supposed to go, and you give that to them, and they still don't want to take care of you at that level. It's like, if you're not going to take care of me, I'm gonna die in here. And nobody wants to die in the emergency room. And so when I looked in my life, and I'm like, me begging my doctors to come and to get to see me so I could get some medication so I don't die, is my experience in reverse of what my friend Dorian was talking about, when I'm going to your facility to be treated, and you're not treating me. That's a whole nother experience outside of the pain that now you're talking about the mental anguish, you're talking about the mental strain, the mental, all that again, is not just connected to our sickle cell community. That's a human flaw that we deal with as far as mental health and going to the doctor already. It takes courage enough to go to the doctor. I hear my community, they wait at home for 6 or 7 hours to go to the hospital because they don't want to deal with all of the stuff that's going to come with getting their medication. And I experienced that same thing trying to get treated with the VA. And so I ask people who are listening that don't single us out, or don't disconnect us or label us as, oh, there's just veteran issues and sickle cell issues. No, this is a human being issue. And if we take care of it as a human issue, then everybody gets taken care of when they go to the hospital. If you're dealing with a heart attack, they're going to rush you to the back. You're dealing with a gunshot wound. Like, there's procedures that they do when you show up that they take care of you with these precautions. And our sickle cell community have been battling just to have something in writing to say, okay, when a person with sickle cell shows up, this is what we do. This is the triage. We bring them in. We did their blood work. We do this, blah, blah, blah. Not waiting. Oh, you got sickle cell? Okay, just have a seat. And you're sitting there for 6 or 7 hours. Like, that crisis could be that one crisis that takes that person out, right? And it's bad enough that they have to sit at home and debate for an hour or 2 or 4 hours to go to the hospital, when they could just say, you know what, I'm starting to feel this pain. Let me go get taken care of, so I don't have to, this doesn't have to turn into something bigger than it is right now. So, all of that is so important in the advocacy work and bringing the awareness, not just to the trait or to the disease, but the humanness that comes with what we're dealing with. And if people be honest with themselves, you would look at that in your own life and be like, man, I could see how that could be challenging, right? I could see how that could not be a nice place to go visit when you're dealing with the pain, especially if you go by yourself and you don't have a person there to talk for you or speak, to stand up for you, and you're dealing with that in your own, with your own pain. So I just want to make sure that people understand, don't label it that this hospital experience is anyone can have this kind of experience. But for our community, we're trying to make sure that we get taken care of, because that crisis, you can't see what's going on inside your body. You can't see the blood. You can't see where it's clogged. You can't see the inside. So the courage and the confidence that it already takes for them to go to the hospital and then to be treated like this from medical professionals, like, it just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. And we're battling to get treated properly. And why is that such a challenge to treat me, with what I'm dealing with? And I can tell you what I'm dealing with, not to invalidate your education, but I've been taught since 5-6 years old to know what my blood count is, to know what medication. So when I show up here, I can tell you, hey, this is what I need. This is what I'm doing, And lastly, the flip side of that is, as a community, we also have to be responsible as a sickle cell community, right? Because as she mentioned, sometimes we show up with attitude. Sometimes we show up with all that. And I get the pain could be the forefront of that, but you also bring that experience to the table as well. And so that too, we label these people as doctors and nurses, but they too could be dealing with stuff in their own life as well, that we have no idea that when we show up to that counter, what they're dealing with in their life. But we expect them, there's a level of expectation as a medical professional that I'm here so you can take care of me. So we also have to make sure that our sickle cell community is responsible for how they show up as well, with that mental toughness, but also with the confidence and courage to stand, like Camila mentioned, to stand there and fight for your rights, because you know that you're here to be taken care of. So it's a two-way street. We just can't put it all up on the medical system, because again, we have to be responsible for how we show up at those hospitals and how we get our care. But it seems to just be this particular type of battle that hasn't been addressed across the board.
Wow, great information. It is 3:50. We got 9 minutes to end today's segment. We're going to be respectful to everybody's time today as the Niners are doing their thing. 23-7. Everybody's excited, going crazy. And I know, Brother Farron, you a big Steelers fan, so we're going to be rooting for your team as well, get you ready. But before you leave, that was just great information from you and Camila about, how community and how our medical folks show up. I'm on a lot of these county calls and Department of Public Health, and we're always on there. And, one of the things, I'm just happy that you all highlighted that, as we have different medical folks and different organizations that we partner with in these hospitals who watch our segments and are trying to connect with the community. And, it just can't be said anymore than what you both put out there, is really dealing with our community with humility and compassion and a little bit of understanding. And these complaints that Camila brought up and that you talked about is not only just something in sickle cell, it is an issue that we face in the healthcare provider due to the rise of opiates and different things that are taking place. But again, there is still that negative stigma that Black women and Black males can handle more pain and they don't get the proper pain management and pain treatment. And we need to shift that narrative, and we need our professional folks and our healthcare providers to understand, especially when you're dealing with folks with sickle cell, the amount of pain, the amount of endurance that they have to deal with, to be compassionate and be understanding, and understanding when these type of folks come into our hospital and our community, that we give them that level of service and access that is needed, as we do for other things in our community. And I'm in the healthcare system. I understand some of these things that take place, and we all have to do a better job. But if they really want to change the narrative and bridge the gap of the systemic racism, the systemic issues that Black folks have when it comes to the health system and our health providers, we also need them to hear us, embrace these concerns and these type of things that people are dealing with in the community, to make that experience a little bit more pleasant, so that folks can feel comfortable and be willing to open up for service. It is a lot of work that needs to be done for community, but we also, and I like how you put it, Farron, as community folks, we have to do a hard job as well to be understanding and compassionate of the work that these professionals have to deal with. It is a bridge gap. It is both sides of this, and we have to connect them together to make sure that that experience for our hospital folks as well as community is something that is definitely a blessing to be a part of, or an experience that they don't have to feel like, I don't want to do that anymore. Because I always say this to our healthcare folks, every time we have that experience, we are losing the opportunity from another Black family or another Black community folks coming to seek service in our healthcare system. And because of these negative and these situations that we deal with, these grin crushing and situations when we have a hospital experience, is part of the reason why we're having such a difficulty time during this COVID of getting folks to come get tested, come get support and services from our hospitals. And we have to do it together. It's going to take a community of folks to come together. But our healthcare professionals, we are in the understanding that you all deal with so much personally and professionally. But again, bring that level of empathy and compassion to the work that you do when you're dealing with our folks in the community, and have that extra level of understanding when people are talking about the pain and their pain management needs, and not just looking at it, oh, they're coming to get high, or they coming to do this, but really that a person is in crisis and they need support and doing the part that they need to make sure that they're at a better state. So thank you both for just putting that out there and, letting community hear it. And, I know the Niner game is on, but as this replay and some of our professional folks that are doing this work in our hospital, our nurses, our doctors, we salute you all, but make sure that as well, our Black doctors, our Black nurses, so many of our powerful Black nurses are getting involved in the healthcare. Please advocate for your people while you in there, and make sure that our people are getting the services that are needed. And we are looking for all you to stand up in that way to make sure that our people, when they come into these institutions, get the support that's needed if they can't advocate for themselves. So with that being said, we have 5 minutes left. I want to give both of you an opportunity to give some parting words to the community, or if there's anything lastly that you all want to say before we close out today, because I want you all to get to the rest of the games and get ready to very important step. But go ahead, Camila, I see your hand up.
Yes, I wanted to point out that we all have had negative experiences, but there are organizations out there such as Both Sides of the Conversation, WDC, and Sickle Cell Disease Implementation Consortium that have heard these experiences from our patients, and they have put in place projects and things to help improve care. So one of the things that a patient can do if you've had these negative experiences and you're iffy on whether or not you want to go back to receive care, or if you've dropped out of receiving care, is you can speak to your doctor and talk about your pain management situation, talk about what works, what doesn't work, what makes you sick, what type of supporting medications do you need in order to have relief, what options are out there, and let that doctor put that into your medical chart. And when you do go to the emergency room, you can say, here, this is my doctor. This information is already in my chart. This is what best works to treat my sickle cell. And that's what the Sickle Cell Disease Implementation Consortium, that's what part of their work is dedicated to, is to making that communication between doctor and patient more fluid, so that people understand what they can do. And even doctors can send that plan in some instances to the emergency room. If you call your doctor's office in advance, they can send that information to the ER and help make your experience better.
Yeah. For me, sickle cell trait, we have to address the risk factors. There have been continuously athletes from high school going into college have collapsed and died playing football, playing the sport that they love. And the families didn't know or had no idea that sickle cell trait is a risk factor. And so that's what I get to deliver in my conversations, in my experience, that sickle cell trait does have risk factors. They do. And you have to be able to pay attention to your body. Your body will tell you what's going on with it. Don't ignore it. And especially if you have sickle cell trait, your hydration is important. Your diet is important. But sometimes you just got to make sure that the families and the children understand that there are risk factors to sickle cell trait, and not to ignore the cramps and the pains and very, very important. So the awareness for me is key, just getting the message out. I appreciate you for your time and for your platform. And again, sickle cell trait and sickle cell, they do come together when it's the conversation of having that parent and them having a child. But sickle cell trait also has its own risk factors and awareness and education, prevention conversation for people who are gene carriers. So just thank you for that.
Man, thank you both. And thank Dr. Treadwell for coming on. Brother, we're going to support you any way we can and support your movement. And we're going to continue to work on this. We're not going to let this sickle cell conversation go away. We are honored and we are thankful to have Camila a part of our both sides of the conversation team. So I know she's going to make sure that we continue to keep the conversation moving forward. And definitely we would like to invite you back to do an educational Thursday. And that segment's a little different than this, where you just come on and run a PowerPoint. And we want to keep this information fresh and bring that awareness. And maybe we could partner together with UCSF or some of the other folks out there to bring some kind of testing and bring some of that stuff to our community. We have to change the narrative, and it starts with all of us bringing this awareness to the community. And that's what we're trying to do here. And that's what we're going to continue to do here at both sides of the conversation, is make these intersections meet, but also bring the resources at these intersections so that our community gets an opportunity to go and get the services so that we can push these conversations about health and how we advocate and do the work that we do for our community forward. Brittany's not here today. Every Sunday, she usually wraps up with a call to action, and she's not here. She does it so eloquently. But today, I'm going to give my call to action to community to, one, stand up, get involved with the election process. Please find out our elected officials who are really getting behind sickle cell and some of the diseases that are impacting the Black community. Make sure when you're doing your ballot research or your candidate research that you take health a part of some of the decision making when you look at who you're going to choose as one of the elected officials to represent our community as we move forward to these midterms, as well as we get ready for our national elections as well. Just keep those things in mind because it's very, very important. The other call to action is community. Be a listening ear to folks in the community that may experience sickle cell or may have the issues, have that humility and compassion, understand some of the sacrifices and some of the things that they go through from some of the information you heard today. Maybe you have a family member, maybe you have a relative, and today's conversation can open up your mind to be more open and supportive and making sure that those folks are doing the things that they need for their health and just advocating and being a part of supporting and uplifting, as this is a very serious disease that impacts those folks at different times and sometimes just untreatable while they're going through it. It's a miserable time for them. So at least as community, we could do our part to make it more comforting, supporting, and loving while we fighting this. There is a number of crises that we are going to continue to fight together as a community. We're going to continue to advocate for our sickle cell folks, as well as all of the other folks that are dealing with these health disparities. And it's going to take us all in solidarity to march together. We don't want to do a bunch of complaining. We want to find solutions, and it starts with these conversations today to have folks come together to let community know this is where it's going on. This is the support we need. This is how we need to move. So community together, let's march together on these health issues in our community for 2022 as we move forward to bringing awareness and bringing the education to our community. When we're talking about Black and brown health, we want to make sure that 2022 is the year that we focus on that and make sure that's the forefront of our daily movement as well as our financial as we move forward here at both sides of the conversation. So thank you all for tuning in today. We are getting ready for our next Hidden Gem segment on Tuesday. You all know we have 3 live shows a week that we do. And this Tuesday, we're going to have another Hidden Gem segment where we will continue to highlight our Black and brown businesses, as well as those community leaders and organizations that do positive things to impact our community. So we are looking forward for that segment. And we'll have another Educational Thursday next week as well, as we're going to continue to pump these folks out to come on our platform and talk to community, bring the education, awareness, and information that's needed so that we can start moving our community forward. We have been in neutral long enough, community. It is time for us to start moving forward this year. And we're going to start day by day, week by week here at both sides of the conversation to continue to engage the community, engage the folks on these conversations, on these topics. Today was a great conversation about sickle cell. We appreciate you all for coming here. Even though we know people are watching our Niners do their thing today and it's football weekend, these important conversations still need to happen. And we're going to make sure at both sides of the conversation, we continue to uplift our sickle cell community and the rest of our community as well as we continue to do our work. So with that being said, Thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you next Tuesday for our Hidden Gem segment. Shout out to all the folks that's getting out for Martin Luther King weekend. Enjoy the weekend. Understand the dream, understand the legacy, understand the work that Dr. King have put in. When we talk about advocacy, we talk about awareness. That was his work, advocating and bringing awareness to our community about the very disparities and issues that impacted us from then to now. And sometimes it feels like we worse off now than then. So we got a lot of work to do. Get out there, live life, and uplift Dr. King and the work that he's done for us in this community, in this country. And we're going to continue to keep pushing forward here at both sides of the conversation. Thank you all for tuning in. Go
Can I say one thing about Dr. King?
Go ahead.
Dr. King has been a total inspiration in my life. I look at what kind of person he had to become to take a stand for what he did, right? That was the confidence, the courage. Like, we need to look at that too as we become advocates and in our community. What kind of person that he became to take a stand like that? It had to be a level of confidence, courageous, boldness. Like, there was something there. So I like to point out that, yes, believe in the dream, but also look at the kind of person that you get to become in your conversation that you want to deliver to the world as well, man. Thank you.
Thank you, Camila. You want to say anything lastly before you leave, before we end today?
I just want to say thank you for highlighting sickle cell, and I'm very grateful for this conversation.
Amen.
And thank you all again. Both sides of the conversation. We're changing the narrative with our voices. All power to the people as we're doing this narrative shift, changing the way we think about us, the way we see it, and the way people view us. We're going to continue to do that work. See you all this Tuesday for our next Hidden Gem segment. God bless you all. Be safe. Anything we could do, Farrah, to help you, any information you want to get out, please send it over to our email address, and we'll get it out on our social media for community. Thank you all for tuning in today.